everyone, today I have a new Lightroom tutorial for you guys. I was editing this photo shoot that I did on the Sony a7 III and the Sony G Master 85mm 1.4 lens, and while I was editing this photo, I thought it would be interesting to show you guys the process of how I take my photos from looking like this into something a little bit more attractive. So as you can see, we've got this beautiful kind of golden hour on Georgette's hair. We shot this literally seconds before the sun set in the horizon, so that's why we've only got a tiny little glimmer of sun on her hair. So I want to take this photo from looking a little bit dull and dark and cold to look a little bit warmer, and I want to add a bit more kind of golden tones and maybe a brown tone as well. I'll also bring up the settings for you guys so you can see how I shot this image. So yeah, let's get into it. Oh, and sorry, before we start, I just want to say that I did film a behind the scenes of this photo shoot here on the 85, and I'm currently editing those photos so then I can edit the video, as you can see with this Lightroom tutorial to show you the process of editing. So that will be up on my channel really soon. I'm really excited to share this whole shoot with you guys. It was so much fun. This is just like a little sneak peek of what's to come. So the first thing I want to do is crop this image. So I'm going to hit the shortcut R for crop, and I'm going to keep the aspect ratio at 2:3 as I really like to have all my images to be the same aspect ratio. And I've got a little bit more negative space on the right. I really prefer my portraits to be kind of in the dead center of the frame. So I'm going to have the rule of thirds kind of go through her eyes here, and I'm going to press enter. So that's looking a lot nicer already to work with. The next thing I want to do is bring up the exposure just so we can see what we're editing, as I shot the photo a little bit underexposed to make sure we can keep all the details that were in her hair from the sunlight. And I'm also going to bring up the temperature just to warm up her skin a little bit more. And I'm also going to bring the tint down as her skin tone is looking a little bit too pink for my liking. So for this image, I actually want to start down here in the tone curve, and I'm going to use the main tone curve to start. I'm going to bring up the shadows of the image and then bring down the blacks in the tone curve. And I'm going to try and keep this curve quite subtle for this image, as I don't want to alter it too much. And then just here in the midtones, I'm going to go and bring it back up just above that midline here to bring those details back into her face. So here's a before and after of the tone curve. And then going back up here to the basics panel in Lightroom, I was like, what's it called? Basic. I'm going to bring up the shadows of the photo. And I want to bring the white point up slightly as well, and then also bring down the blacks just to add a little bit more contrast. So now that I've made those basic adjustments, I'm going to go back to our tone curve again and just tweak the points a little bit. Sometimes I like to kind of go back and forth while I'm editing a photo, as when you adjust one thing, it can affect what something else looks like. So just then I kind of pulled all the points up a tiny amount, maybe by like 2 pixels, just to brighten up the overall image, as it was looking a little bit too muddy with the tone curve pulled down more. Now I'm going to head into the blue channel of our tone curve, and I'm going to add a similar S-curve by pulling up the shadows of the blues. Then I'm going to bring down the blacks in the blue channel, and this will kind of add a nice warmth to the overall colors. And then in the white / midtones area, I'm going to pull the blues back up, which will kind of get rid of that greeny yellow tinge that was on her skin. I want this curve to affect mostly the shadows of the image, so that's why I'm putting all the points down here in this bottom corner. So as you can see in the shadows and like the blacks of the photo, we do have a bit of a green tinge going on. So now I'm going to head into the green channel of the tone curve. And in the blacks, I'm just going to pull it down ever so slightly, because the greens can really affect an image. See, I just put it down by like 1 millimeter, and it made a big difference in what the colors look like. So I just want to do the tiniest amount there, just to add that warmth to the overall image. And then again, here in the white points, I'm going to bring up the greens again by like a pixel or 2 to balance out her skin tone. So here is a before and after of what this is looking like so far. Before and after. So the next couple of things that I want to do involve the adjustment brush and the radial filter. So we're going to go with the adjustment brush first. I'm going to change the effect back to nothing. And I want to make the brush just about the size of her eyes and her eyebrow area. And I know you guys are going to say in the comments that I should use a reflector when I'm shooting close-up portraits like this, which yes, I kind of agree, I really should. You can see there's a bit of a shadow here in her eyes and they don't really stand out that much in a picture. If I had held a reflector out here to the right, it could have reflected some light back on Georgette's face and that would have really brought out some details in the eyes. But if you're like me and you're stubborn and you didn't bring a reflector to your photo shoot, you can do this to kind of help the portrait stand out a little bit more. I wouldn't recommend this. I would just prefer to use a reflector and get it right in camera. But I'm going to click once on one eye and once on the other eye. And now I'm going to hover over my exposure with my mouse, and then I'm going to use the up arrow key to very slowly bring up the exposure until I'm happy with what it looks like. The reason I don't like to click the slider to move it around is because it can look a little bit extreme and it's hard to get that precision on exactly where you want it. So if I want to just do small tweaks, then I use that method. So I think about 0.30 looks good. Now I'm going to grab the adjustment brush again, and in effect, I'm going to change it to Iris Enhance. And I'm going to zoom into our image at 1 by 1 here. Okay, so now with the Iris Enhance, I'm going to make the brush just as big as her iris. And again, I'm going to do one click on the right eye and one click on the left eye, which will kind of bring out the saturation of the eyes, add some clarity and some exposure as well. Since I bumped up the overall temperature of this photo, I'm going to bring it down just on her irises a little bit so they look back to being blue because she had very blue eyes. So I think just about there. I'm going to press enter so I can see what it all looks like. Yeah, I'm really happy with how that's looking. Now that we've done a few major adjustments, I'm going to start bringing down the exposure a little bit. I do like my photos to look quite dark and moody. I don't like them to look quite overexposed, but this is just my personal taste. So I think just there is really nice. And then while I was zoomed in, I noticed I haven't sharpened my photo yet. So I'm just going to bring up the amount and the radius as well. And here's a before and after of the sharpening since this video is in 4K. So there's the after and there's the before. I just love all the detail it brings out in like the eyelashes and the hair and the skin texture. So yeah, I always love sharpening. So the next thing I want to use is the radial filter, which is just here. So as I mentioned, and you can see, we've got some really beautiful golden hour happening on the left side of the image. However, I feel like it's making it look quite unbalanced since there's nothing going on in the right hand side of the image. So I'm going to create like a bit of an oval shape with the radial filter and kind of move it into place to affect kind of this hairline and the background here as well. And then I'm going to hit invert so it only affects the inside of the circle rather than the outside. And I also have to change the effect back to temperature. Here I'm just going to play around a little bit with the exposure. I want to bring the highlights up so we can maybe see a bit more detail in the hair in the back here. And then I also want to bring down the blacks to add some contrast. And then I'm also going to bring up the temperature so it looks a little bit warmer and we can kind of match it to this side a little bit more. And I'll also, let me see what the saturation looks like. Yeah, I think just there looks really nice. And I might move it just there, I think looks good. The next thing I want to move on to is in HSL. So her skin tone is looking still maybe a little bit pink. So I'm going to go into the red hue and bring it up more into the oranges. And then in the orange hue, I'm going to bring it down. So it kind of balances out that color a little bit. And then with yellow, I'm going to bring it down so it's a little bit more orange. And then the same with greens, I'm going to pull them down so any green that you see here in the background and here on the left side will appear more yellow as well. Under saturation, I want to bring the green saturation down and then the yellows up. And I think I want to bring the orange saturation up as well. Again, just to accentuate that beautiful golden hour that we see around her. And then in luminance, something that I like to do, especially when I shoot with white outfits in the shade or at blue hour, is I like to bring the luminance of blue up, as it will kind of brighten up any whites that you have in your outfit. I think the next thing I want to do is play around with split toning to add some different colors to the image. Since this is a super warm image overall, with the highlights I want to go kind of the opposite way and add a bit of a cyan color that will affect her skin tone. So any kind of adjustments that we've done to make this super warm will be offset a little bit with the highlights of split toning. And then in the shadows, I want to keep it super warm, so I think I'm going to go for a reddy orange color. I really like this. And then I'm going to bring the saturation down until I'm happy with how it blends out in the image. So even though it's super subtle, if I show you a before and after of split toning, you can see that it really adds a different look and vibe to the photo. It just makes that warmth really pop, but it also retains her natural skin tone, which I really like. And then the last couple of things that I want to do is I'm going to bring the luminance of the orange slider up just a touch by about +8, and then I'm going to do the same thing with the red luminance too. And then I want to see if I could add a little bit more contrast into the image by pulling down the black point of the tone curve, which, yeah, that adds a nice contrast, kind of punchy vibe to the photo, which I really like. So here is a final before and after of our Lightroom edits. Here is the before and here is the after. I really hope you guys found this helpful. Please let me know what you thought about this tutorial in the comments below. And if there's any other Lightroom tutorials that you'd like to see, I would really like to start filming these more often again, because we kind of stopped doing that for a little while. I'm not sure why. But yeah, as always, thank you guys so much for watching. I make new videos every single week, so I will see you guys all next time. Bye!